although I could do that, but I won't today. So welcome to Cities Charging Ahead. This is the fourth meeting in our series, our first series of Charging Up, focused on charging electric vehicles, charging stations. And we are going to do introductions, and I will start. If you saw the agenda, you know it's not a brain buster today. Just your name, your organization, and what is your favorite kind, form of apple? That comes from Caitlin, because it's fall and apples, and we started listing all the different kinds. All the different kinds, but we didn't want to give you, too many. We want you to think about it yourself. So I'm Diana McEwen. I direct the Metro region of CERT's Clean Energy Resource Teams at the Great Plains Institute. And my very favorite form of apple is caramelled apple from Pine Tree Apple Orchard in Delwood, between White Bear Lake and Stillwater. Leslie probably is very familiar with that apple orchard. I will call people and tell people who's on deck just to have you prepped and ready to go. Chris, and then Jen Hasbrook.
My name is Chris Acuna. I'm with the Great Plains Institute, and my favorite kind of apple would probably be either apple cider or apple cider donut. I'm a big fan of going to the apple orchard and then just buying donuts and apple cider, not really doing anything with the apples.
Right on. So Jen and then Caitlin.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jen Hasbrook, Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Eden Prairie. And my favorite would be my mom's apple crisp. Not anybody's apple crisp, my mom's.
Just to be clear. That sounds right, though. Southwestern Minnesota mom, apple crisps, probably pretty good, I'm guessing. Awesome. Well, Caitlin and then Leslie.
Hi, Caitlin Bachland from Great Plains Institute. My favorite form of apple, I guess, is the apple turnover from Ferguson's Morningside Orchard in Galesville, Wisconsin, which, fun fact, was my first job. My first job was located at that same orchard. So.
Awesome. All right, Leslie, then Lauren.
I'm Leslie McKenzie, a volunteer in Marina and St. Croix. And my favorite form of apple is a baked apple. Wonderful treat in the evening.
Yum, good one. Lauren and then John.
My name is Lauren. I am the Sustainability Coordinator with the City of Rochester. I'm honestly not really a big apple person, so probably just like hot apple cider. I enjoy that in the fall if I'm like at an orchard or something, but.
Sounds good.
Everyone.
John, then Emily.
I'm John Howard. I work for the City of Winona as the National Resource and Sustainability Coordinator. My favorite apple is definitely apple pie, most definitely.
Awesome. Emily, then Annie.
Good morning, everyone. Emily Ziering with the City of St. Louis Park. I don't really care for apples.
I was wondering if somebody would say apple cider vinegar. All right, Annie, then Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Potworth. I'm a sustainability specialist with the City of St. Louis Park. My favorite kind is definitely apple pie with some vanilla ice cream on top.
Yes, ma'am. Rebecca, then Anthony.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Heisel, and I'm the Green Corps member serving with the Great Plains Institute for this upcoming year. And I would say my favorite apple would be apple strudel, but if it's like really flaky and crispy.
Nice. And just so folks know, Rebecca just started this week. This is day 4, and she is going to be focusing on electric vehicles and supporting kind of efforts with cities and utilities and all the EV work that we do. So you will probably interact with her at some point in the future. So big welcome to Rebecca. Anthony, then Drew.
Hey everyone, I'm Anthony. I'm also a Green Corps member working with the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. Favorite apple? Gotta go with apple pie. My dad makes really good apple pie.
Nice. And where are you from originally?
I'm actually originally from California, like the San Francisco Bay Area. So I have family. My mom's originally from like Watertown, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis. So that would come back.
A little bit of outside of Minneapolis, quite a ways outside of Minneapolis.
Yeah, I'm getting to know the geography.
Good. Well, welcome.
Thank
Drew
you.
and then Dave Wanberg.
Hi, I'm Drew Ingleson. I'm a planner at the City of Minnetonka, and my favorite is apple fritter, actually.
There you go. Dave, then Kelsey.
Yeah, I'm Dave Wanberg, city planner for Faribault. My favorite apple would be a caramel apple. And I do have to say, I don't know if any of you have the same issue. I've got 3 Zoom meetings at the same time overlapping, so I'm only going to be able to be on until about 10:45.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Kelsey and then Melissa.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I'm the Green Corps member for the city of Winona. And my favorite form of apple is probably apple cider donuts.
Perfect. Melissa, then Allie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Melissa Bartman from the city of Red Wing, and my favorite type of apple would be apple crisp. And like Annie, I have to have ice cream with it.
All right. Allie, then Story.
Hi, this is Allie. I'm with the city of Inver Grove Heights, and I think it was Drew. I'm going to have to go with you. I love apple fritters too. So.
All right. Thank you. Story and then Shannon.
Hi, I'm Story. I am the Green Corps member with the City of Golden Valley, and I think my favorite form of apple, going back to the Pine Tree Apple Orchard, I think it's their apple donut, because I'm from Stillwater originally, and that's my fall spot.
It's the best apple orchard. Sorry, all the rest of you. It's the best one, and I know that I brought them into the office. But Chris has had those, and he loves apple donuts, so he's had them. They're good.
Really good. They're excellent.
So good. Wow, so many Green Corps members. Yay! It's obviously Green Corps week. Shannon with Oakdale, new staff person there as well.
Hey, I'm sorry. I do not have a camera on my desktop, and it's day 2, and I don't know how to get one. So here we go. I am Shannon, and I'm with the city of Oakdale. And my favorite version of apple is definitely hard cider.
There you go. I was waiting for somebody to bring that one out. So Ellen Brenna.
Good morning, City of Shoreview here. I'm Ellen, and my favorite form of apple is apple cider, hot apple cider. It's delicious and wonderful. And I've got Maria here with me as well, and I'll let her answer.
Hi, I'm Maria, and I love apple pie. That's probably my favorite.
Awesome. Thank you. It's always fun to have a little something to kind of get to know each other a little bit. Now I really want to have some of Jen's mom's apple crisps. So that. So we'll get started. We make you take these surveys so we can get some more information to understand where you're at. And I like to kind of put that back out there so you can see like what were the results of that? What did that mean? What was the kind of results of that? And there was just so much information, and we had allowed survey taking up till just about when we started, so we didn't have enough time to really crunch it to do it at the beginning. So we wanted to just spend a few minutes sharing with you kind of what you were saying to us about your EV journey, and we're going to focus on the charging aspect. So I'm going to share a few slides and talk to you about what we've learned. That's me. Here I am. There it is. Okay, here we go. So, we were asking people kind of, first of all, we had 29 cities that responded, which was great. And those cities also identified 23 additional colleagues that perhaps would want to join us for particular topics. So that's nearly doubling, the cities charging ahead 1.0, if you will. We had 28 cities participating, so 29 cities, but then 23 colleagues. And then now also we have a number of different Green Corps members and some new folks, and we'll see if others decide to join for different topics, but that's really great. A number are newer to the topic of electric vehicles, and we thought maybe there'd be a couple and maybe I could talk, meet with them or talk to them one-on-one, but there were quite a few. I sent some information, links to our facts, FAQ, and other things. There's a lot of information on Drive Electric Minnesota. And so we weren't going to put together specifically an EV 101 per se, but as we've been going through, you've noticed with this charging, the first session we covered a lot of the basics so that you could understand the pieces that we were talking about with regards to charging. So Caitlin spent some time kind of going over that, and we've got webinars that also have information and a whole slide deck about EV 101 that we can point folks to. Additionally, there's going to be a series of EV webinars in the first week of December, one of which will be EV 101. And so we'll make sure that you get that information, and if you still need to kind of understand that. But Chris, let's make a note to make sure to send a link reminding people where the slide deck that we created for Cities Charging Ahead that has a lot of the basics in it is on the resource page under Communities Charging Ahead on the Drive Electric Minnesota site. So there's a lot of information there. And if you're still feeling like you really need some answers to questions, let Chris or I know, and we'll figure out how to get to, talk to you about it, and maybe even our new colleague Rebecca will follow up with you. But hopefully we've given you what you needed to participate in this cohort. Also really exciting, we asked, because this is a peer cohort. This is not just about Caitlin and I talking at you. We really, the whole point of a peer cohort is that you can learn from each other. And there's a bunch of cities that have done things either before, during, or after Cities Charging Ahead that can share. And as you've seen, we ask cities to present, and I decided instead of trying to scramble every time, we asked during the survey, would you be willing to present about what you've done? And a number of cities said they will. So 41% of the cities said that they were willing to present on one of the topics that they had worked on. So that's great to, to draw from those experience, and hearing from each other is super critical. So that was really great. And as you've seen, a number of different cities, and I'm trying to alternate and have different cities as much as possible present, but obviously there's some that went all in on a bunch of topics. So I sometimes reach back to the same ones. So thanks for that. Go ahead, Chris. Oh, there you go. Also, we asked your utility. I think, that's an interesting thing, and it matters because different utilities have different programs. Not surprising, most of the cities are Xcel Energy customers. But we have a number of co-ops, a couple of municipal utilities, and others. The other co-op, that's a co-op that's not part of the GRE family, if you will. So just an interesting kind of mix to see who's there. And, in particular for Xcel, they have a number of pilot programs, and some of you have been participating. We've heard a little bit about that, but, we've got some information and we can share it with you if you don't already. I think the point of this is, make sure you're talking to your utility, because if they don't have a program, hearing from you that you're doing things might kind of get them to start thinking about offering a program, although a number of them are already thinking about that. So kind of gauging that interest in charging stations and plans. We really broke out, what are cities thinking about? Are you thinking about charging just for city use, on city property for public use, or kind of more generally out in the community for public use? And there are a number of cities in 2020 and 2021 that are, doing a combination of city use only, a number of them on their city property for public use. I think some cities are doing a charger on city property and having it be a combo where, maybe during the day it's for fleet use, and, residents, et cetera, can't use it, and then they release it at night. So there's some different hybrids that you can do there for sure. And then a number, it looks like, kind of heading into 2022 or later, looking at plans for this. I know that you guys have to plan ahead of time for capital, planning, and looks like there's going to be a number of ones that are, kind of thinking about out in the community for public use. So just interesting to look at, where people are at, but definitely a number on city property for public use. I mean, that's the easiest thing for you. So go ahead. So also, kind of just looking at, we wanted to know what kinds of chargers, level 2 or the DC fast chargers, and why did you do it? It's important for us to, tell our funders that are funding projects like this that, if you did it because of something we've done. And so under the level 2, there's 28 chargers that cities have said that they've done, and 4 because of Green Step Cities, because we have, there's actions that you can take credit for in Green Step Cities, a couple from because of cities charging ahead, and then some that did it for both. We have also a DC fast charger there. 7 stations that were done, we asked about partners, partners, the PCA, ZEP, Rotary Club, Chamber, et cetera, so that partner question. We have 3 level 2 and 1 DC fast charger, all at a single charging hub with 1 city, and that was actually at the Beach Lake, Band of Ojibwe. 5 charging stations that are used by city fleets as well as the public, so that's that dual use. And then you can just see a list of the kinds of locations. I think it's interesting to look at where are people putting those chargers, gives you ideas about where to think about having those chargers. Go ahead. So now I'm going to transition into just a really kind of brief overview of funding. What are the different kind of mechanisms and, for funding, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague. So, and we've talked about some of these things, but, in a funding overview, one of the things we saw a lot during Cities Charging Ahead 1.0 was look for partnerships, whether it's like Red Wing did here, pictured here, with their local chamber, with your utility, with a community center or a business. There might be, what are the opportunities, look for partnerships. And I think early on, it was hard for some communities, especially small communities, to justify the cost, although a level 2 can be pretty reasonable. And so, really thinking about, where are the opportunities for partnership in your community. There are purchasing cooperatives. I think a number of folks use the state contract. The state contract has EVSE, as we call it. We say charging stations usually, but it's electric vehicle service equipment. EVSE is the common kind of nerd jargon word. And so the state contract has those options, and you can get them more reasonably through the state contract, perhaps. Sourcewell, formerly the National Joint Powers Alliance, is also a source of cooperative purchasing, and they have actually a much bigger selection of products than the state contract, but our state contract, our folks at the Office of Enterprise Sustainability, the Department of Admin, are working very hard to get as many products on the contract as possible. So that's good to know. Those are ways to kind of look to save money. It's not giving you funding, but it is saving you money on the purchase. And then grants. There aren't a lot of grants out there. I think early on, for the early adopters, there were more. But right now, CERT seed grants are one. We know that a couple, I think Austin, the utility in Austin, and Red Wing and others got some seed grants to help with their purchasing their charging station. And then obviously the Volkswagen Settlement funds. Right now the RFP is open for the DC fast charger, which is really focused on greater Minnesota and along specific routes and corridors. But the level 2 funding, charging station funding, should be coming out soon. They said fall 2020. I think Tuesday was officially fall, so we're expecting to see that anytime now. That will be one that probably is something that you could look at as an opportunity to get some funds. It wouldn't be all of it, it's a portion, but a good portion of it. So just kind of an overview of the opportunities and places where you can find funding. I think that is my last slide. I guess question and answer if there's any questions from folks. I mean, it was pretty basic overview. Any questions? I get all the easy stuff. Caitlin gets all the hard stuff. Send all your hard questions to Caitlin. Thank you. So we're going to talk now about, I mentioned the Volkswagen Settlement Fund. A big part of the reason that we launched this cohort with this Charging Up series was really to prepare you to be in a better place to apply for level 2 funding for charging stations. And so, we've put together some slides, and we actually did a Volkswagen webinar, Volkswagen Settlement Fund webinar July 30th. And actually, I'm just finishing up a blog that we'll be putting out into the world shortly. And we also have a recording of that if you want to watch and go a little deeper on this. But we're going to give kind of the crib note version and talk about what were the lessons learned from the first phase that will help you be in a better place. So I will turn it over to my colleague Chris and then Caitlin to talk about some of the lessons learned from phase 1.
Here we go. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Diana. So I'm going to be talking about just a couple kind of best practices from what we learned from phase 1 of the level 2 VW settlement grants. I can't tell if this slide is advancing. Doesn't look like it is.
It advanced, but then you froze for a second, but you're good.
Okay. So these are all of the charging locations that were selected for the level 2 grants. So there's, it's a little bit metro-centric, but they're, oops. It's a little bit metro-centric, but they are all over the state. It looks like it keeps advancing the slides instead of going back. I think I have a bad connection, but I'm using my phone, so my audio shouldn't be a problem. Thank you, Caitlin.
I'll just advance for you, Chris, so you can tell me when you want to go to the next slide.
You can go to the next slide now. So all of those chargers were open 24/7 and open to the public, I think, except for one that's in a parking garage. So some of the requirements for phase 1 installations that the MPCA had were that site plans needed to be approved before construction began, and they did this so that nobody broke ground when they would need to make changes later on, because that is a very expensive mistake. As there is a news article about one of our cities in Minnesota where that happened, and it's not a fun fix for anyone. So there needed to be at least 2 dedicated parking spaces per charger. So one charger with 2 plugs would service at least 2 stations, or at least 2 parking stalls. Bollards or some kind of physical barrier needed to be present to protect the charger if it's a freestanding pedestal charger. They needed to be ADA compliant around both the charger and the parking stalls. The charger needed to come with a 5-year manufacturer warranty, just guaranteeing that the charger would be working if anything happened to it for at least 5 years. There needed to be a cord management system, because that is another kind of expensive fix that really shouldn't happen when people leave the cord on the ground. It can be taken out by a snowplow or by another vehicle. So either like a coil to put the cord on, or a retractable one. EV parking signs and striped stalls. And another requirement was that each charger needed to have a renewable energy component For a lot of chargers, that looked like buying RECs from the local utility, and a couple other, for example, the city of Fridley will be tracking their charging with an EV or with a solar installation that's next door on another property. So they'll be kind of measuring the output of the charger based on how much solar the panels are getting. So we can go to the next slide. And one of the best things that you can do is just follow the directions that the MPCA has. So this is a list of the checklist that they sent out to grantees this time around, and it's got a really nice step-by-step process for what you need to do, starting with the mapping your location and then going to finding a suitable charger that meets all the requirements. And in this is included with all the language that you would need to give to possible vendors and contractors so they know exactly what you need. Next slide. And here is some ADA compliance guide and examples that the MPCA also sent out. And this is from the alternative, or another kind of more in-depth requirement for ADA compliance in EV chargers can be found at the Alternative Fuels Data Center, and we can send that out with the resources. And these are just useful examples of what kind of striping and placement you would need depending on your parking lot needs. And another thing a lot of people did is just put the parking stall right next to an already ADA compliant stall. That way you don't have to repaint. You can just kind of designate another parking stall as ADA compliant. Next slide. Yeah, so some of the resources were the ADA compliance guide, the checklist, sharing your EV stencils. That's something that several people have had issues with, is just kind of finding a nice stencil. So I think, I don't remember exactly which cities have shared their stencils, but I can double check that. And it just helps that there's some branding across the area. So if you're looking for stencils, you can ask us, and I can put you in contact with some people who I know have stencils and might be willing to share. And of course, you can find a bunch of additional EV charging resources at the Drive Electric Minnesota website. And I think that's it from me.
All right, thanks, Chris. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to prepare for the level 2 RFP that has not yet been released, but we anticipate it will be released soon, as well as giving you some information about the DC fast charging RFP that's out right now. So starting with the DC fast charging opportunity. So the important thing to keep in mind here is the request for proposal is for an entire corridor. It's not just for one station. So if you're looking for funding to put a DC fast charger in your community, this is not the right opportunity for that. Instead, it could be a good opportunity to work with developers that will be applying to fund that entire corridor. So sometimes developers are looking for site hosts before they even submit an application, just to kind of show to the MPCA that, you know, we already have a lot of interested site hosts. It's going to be relatively easy if we get funding to then go install these DC fast charging stations. So if you are interested in kind of nominating your city and you want to be connected with a developer, we can try and help be a matchmaker in that sense. We don't, of course, know everyone who's going to be applying, but we do have the list that applied in phase 1, and so we anticipate that they will be applying again in phase 2. So if you do want to be a site host, you'll obviously want to make sure that you are along the proposed corridor routes. If you're not along those routes, then again, this is not a great opportunity to get funding for DC fast charging stations in your community. So the RFP is out right now. The link is available in this slide, and the deadline is November 25th. So the map you can see here, all of the green are where they are proposing corridors for the RFP. And so if your community is along that one of those green routes, then I think, you know, it would be great for you to kind of nominate and be a site host for this. So you probably want to know what makes a good site host. You want to be obviously close to the proposed corridors. It's also helpful to have 24/7, 365-day access for the public. If you can make sure that the location is well lit, that would be great. You want to be within walking distance to services, retail, and dining so that people have something to do as they're charging their vehicle. Having some additional capacity to add more chargers in the future would also be a good thing. They're also looking for locations with 3-phase power, or at least very close to 3-phase power with a lower distribution voltage. Some location that is near turf, because that can reduce installation costs. Also, if a location will be redeveloped or newly developed during that funding timeline, that can be a great location because, again, it's reducing installation costs. And hopefully you all are acting as community champions, but that can be really important as well to developers. So these are all just things to keep in mind as you're considering nominating your city to be a site host. But I do want to spend more time on the level 2 RFP because I think that is where most of you will be interested in applying for funds. So if you were on the call a couple weeks ago, yeah, I think it was, this information might sound a little familiar to you, but if you weren't, hopefully it's still helpful. So I just wanted to provide some considerations as you're thinking about, you know, where in your community would be a good location for a level 2 station. So again, very similar to DC fast charging stations, you want somewhere that people can spend 2 to 4 hours while they're charging their vehicle. So parks, theaters, libraries, hotels, downtown areas, places like that make great site hosts. Again, identifying sites that are undergoing new development or redevelopment will help reduce installation costs. Identifying locations that serve vulnerable populations is really important for the MPCA VW opportunity. They are specifically looking for locations in tribal areas that serve low-income residents or people of color, or all three. And additionally, you will get extra points on the MPCA application if you indicate that you will be connecting your station to renewable energy, which could either be an on-site connection through like direct solar or a utility program. So something to keep in mind there. This is the MPCA Environmental Justice Resource Map. And so we have it linked here so you can access it after today's call. But you can, once you're logged into this map, you can type in your city name or even an address and get a sense of if it falls within one of these 3 priority areas. If it doesn't fall in one of those 3 priority areas, you can still apply, but just know that your application might not be as competitive. So some best practices to keep in mind as you're looking for possible sites for the level 2. You'll want to identify shovel-ready sites. So are there sites that you've previously installed conduit where you could easily add another station? Installing at buildings and lots owned by you means you don't have to enter a site host agreement, so it can just reduce some complexities there. If you install in larger lots, then sometimes that can be a little bit more friendly to those that are driving internal combustion engines, particularly in greater Minnesota. They don't want EVs to be taking up most of the lot. So if you're looking to install in a larger lot, that can just make things a little bit more friendly in those areas. Lastly, you'll want to look for covered areas because this will just help keep your station in tip-top shape from weather elements. So you can dive more into our site selection guidelines on the Drive Electric Minnesota website, and I have the URL there. Once you get to that page, you will see this kind of Prezi map, which is interactive, and you can click through it to pull up all the details, see some pictures. You can also download a PDF if that is more useful for you. So these are just some screenshots from that Prezi tool. And this is the PDF that you can download. All right. Let's see. So the phase 2 timeline, there's a couple of RFPs out right now. So there's an electric school bus pilot that is due October 13th. I encourage you, if you haven't already, to at least let school districts and third-party bus operators in your community know about this. It's a really great opportunity to get more of this technology out on the roads. The other one that's out right now is the fast charging electric vehicle charging station one. So that, as I mentioned before, the deadline is November 25th. And the level 2 one is not out right now, but we anticipate within at least the next couple of months that it will be coming out. So you can access all of this information, all of the details at the link you see on the screen there. So some next steps to think about, just kind of summarizing everything up. You can use the information and resources that we talked about today to start identifying potential sites in your community. You can also start working with potential site hosts about charging stations, which could either be a DC fast charging station or level 2. Additionally, you'll want to determine whether you might want to apply for at least the level 2 station, see whether, city-owned property could be a good either DC fast charging site or level 2. And then once that level 2 RFP is released, encouraging applications or submitting them from the city. And with that, that is all I have. I think we have time for some questions. Yes.
Definitely. Questions? Oh, Leslie, go ahead.
So I'm seeing the pictures of the parking spots. Is it possible to do this in a parallel parking spot, not a front end?
Chris, I don't know if you have any guidance on that from working with the MPCA, but I think it probably depends on where that parallel parking spot is. So if it's along like a public right-of-way, there's definitely going to be some more consideration there. You'll want to make sure that there's a city ordinance that allows that. You might need to check with the Minnesota Department of Transportation if it's not on city-owned property. That was, I can't remember the city, but they...
Litchfield.
Yeah, Litchfield. So they had some issues with that. So it just kind of depends on where the location is.
And I'm sorry if I don't know this. Is every road owned by MnDOT? Yes, it's a road. It's the main road in our town. But it's not a highway.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. You know, I think it would definitely be worth checking with your city planning department and also with MnDOT.
We don't have a city planning department.
Okay. Diana?
So I would reach out to MnDOT and just double check. I mean, that's an easy thing you could check before the RFP even comes out. You know, is that a MnDOT road? Because if it is, that really restricts you. And I can provide you some contact information to MnDOT folks that would be able to answer that, so you don't have to try to figure out who's the right person to talk to. We have some great contacts over at MnDOT. It's a really good question, though. You know, you have a very small community in a small area, so the options are pretty limited. So it's important to know. And you know, and yet I think your location is a really great location. It's, you know, there's a lot of people that go up and down the river there, and so, you know, I think that it's a good question and good consideration. So we can find out that information, help you get that.
Because we've just spent time. We've identified 7 potential locations, and we also ranked them by the likelihood that we'd get iced, which is high in some of these areas on the weekend when all the tourists are here. So we found what that location we think is ideal, but it is parallel parking, and it's far enough away from the main attraction that probably it would be available. It's not on the highway, but it's on the main road. We also tried contacting, we really need to hear from Excel. We don't understand energy, like the availability of energy to that space. But we're unsure if we're going to be able to get any actual information from them in advance of actually committing to do something.
Sure.
Leslie, are you in Marine?
I'm in Marine.
Yeah. You might want to reach out to Washington County. I'm going to guess a lot of the roads that you have going through there are probably county roads. Ann Turwitt is one of the people in the streets department over there that might be a useful contact for you.
What was the name?
Her name's Ann Turwitt, and I don't remember how to spell her last name.
Okay, Washington.
Like it sounds.
Okay. Yeah, because our main road is being torn up, this is the perfect time. We don't want to miss this opportunity to maybe even just get conduit in so that we're ready in future, if that's the best we can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anne, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I believe it's a city-owned street, but they have received grants for this redo, so those may come with strings attached. So it's probably a good idea to check with some of the other powers that be. But it is.
Yeah, and if you guys need help getting, you know, the right contacts at Excel too, it sounds like you're, you know, working on that, and we can help with that too.
We had a meeting with them last week.
Oh, well, perfect.
But they were very careful about not to promise anything.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Those are really good questions. I mean, other cities probably have questions about whether you can, you know, park or have an EV charger on a parallel spot. I was kept trying to think, like, if I've ever seen one. I don't know that I have. That doesn't mean that it's not possible. Others? Okay. Well, we will move forward. I've got, you know, as we usually do, I've asked a couple of cities to share how did they fund their charging stations. And I have 2 cities that are going to present, but, you know, perhaps if Ellen is, or not Ellen, I'm sorry. Oh, I get confused. So it wasn't Ellen. You know, Brandy might chime in a little bit about their experience with, because Brandy with Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, they did get Volkswagen funding for a charging station up there for a level 2. So maybe she can chime in about that or answer questions about that if people have that. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Emily from St. Louis Park and to share a little bit about how did you fund your charging station? And look, I found pictures of your charging station.
Very nice. Thank you, Dinah. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so our story is not all that interesting, but I'm happy to share it. Our charging stations were installed in about December of 2019. So they're still pretty new. They're at our rec center, which if you haven't been to St. Louis Park is a really giant facility with a big outdoor pool and 2 different ice rinks, actually, and now an exterior ice rink as well. So it gets a lot of use year round, which is great. And so we thought, given the types of use here, that we would install a level 2 charger. So we have a dual head CT4000 charge point charger here. This was paid for out of just simple operating funds. We didn't apply for a grant. I started with the city in late October of 2019, and this was kind of one of the first things I was handed to say, like, go get this in the ground and get it activated. So I didn't really have a ton of time to look into grant opportunities or any kind of external funding. So luckily we had the funding, but I think retrospectively, I would have liked to see if there are outside funding sources we could have leveraged. This was a pretty expensive installation. We put 2 circuits outside the building to plan for future EV charging. Only one of them is in the ground. And the reason for that is because in 2 years, we're planning on tearing up that parking lot and resurfacing it. And we're probably going to be moving this charger and then adding the second charger. So this installation was about $25,000 when you include the trenching and the unit and the labor and all that. So more significant, I think, than most level 2 chargers would be. So don't let that scare you. That just happened to be kind of the situation with this particular building. What else? We as a city are 100% subscribed to renewable energy. So where we don't have on-site solar, we are subscribed to Renewable Connect and WindSource through Excel. So the nice thing about this charger is if you are using it, then you are 100% powered with renewable energy because the St. Louis Park owns the RECs for those subscriptions. What else can I tell you? I would say, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it almost looks like that's parallel parking. Is that parallel parking?
It's not. It's just 2 spots that are, you know, back to back, head to head, however you want to look at it. And it's convenient that the unit is up there on the curb and that both spaces can reach it. And that sign faces both. It's printed to face both directions, which is pretty handy.
Got it.
What else can I tell you about it? The other thing I would consider for future installations is looking at our bidding process, which is not specifically funding related, but I would say, like, for any future projects, I really want to be sure that we're looking at DBE certified firms in the bid process just for equity reasons. So if there are DBE certified electricians in the metro area, and I know that there are because I've run those reports from the state, I would definitely want to include them in potential bids for doing that work. I think that's about all I have on this. We do have some future EV plans underway right now, which I might talk about a bit later when we get into discussion, but I think I'll stop there in case there's any questions.
Can you say what DBE is for people that might not know what that means?
Disadvantaged business enterprise. So that's what's considered a minority or woman-owned business.
Great, thanks. Other questions? Questions for, and thank you for pointing out, yeah, $25,000 is pretty expensive for a level 2. But I think that that's, you know, one of those siting considerations where you're putting it, you know, and especially then if you're gonna have to move it, how far is it from the power? All those siting considerations make a difference. And so, you know, often especially with a level 2, the installation is going to cost more than the actual charger. And so, you know, really kind of looking at that and thinking about where you're putting it, there's a whole bunch of considerations. So that was really helpful to hear about that.
I do want to mention that this unit was purchased through the Mayor's Climate Cooperative or Climate, I can't remember what that organization is called, but it's essentially the same price as buying it off the state contract. And that's about $5,000 for the dual head charge point unit. And in terms of charging the public, we're not charging right now. We have the ability to flip that switch and start charging them in the future, but it didn't make a ton of sense. There's a free chargers 2 blocks from here. So we just kind of wanted to be part of that wave to encourage people to use them.
Great.
This is
Does
John.
anybody have any?
I have a question. Emily, did you pay ChargePoint to operate the system, or how does that how is that managed to kind of the ongoing maintenance?
Sure. So when you have a charge point unit, you have to pay for a cloud plan, which is either I think a 1-year or a 3-year agreement, and that really just is to connect the unit to the satellite or to Wi-Fi or whatever you're doing, so that you have those communications and that so you can collect the data. It's on my to-do list to call ChargePoint and find out what those fees are, because I'm about to pay them for the nature center and I don't even know what they are because they were purchased by our vendor. So when you purchase the unit the first year, I think the costs are kind of embedded, which is why I don't know what they are. I think this month we are due to renew those costs. I'm sorry, I've got to feed the beast here. So that will reveal what we are paying. But I think there's an additional fee if you want to charge users for using for paying for use. There's an additional monthly fee, I believe, but I'll get those details, John.
There's an admin fee for processing that. And that's actually why a lot of cities at first didn't charge, because it was going to cost them more in the administrative cost to have that system in place than it would be to pay for the electricity. And so you know, there's probably a tipping point at some point where it does make sense. But yeah, you know, and report back to us what the cloud cost is. And again, that's with a smart charger, you know, with a quote unquote dumb charger that doesn't collect data, you don't have that cloud fee. But, you know, for the most part, I think it does make sense to have a smart charger where you can collect data and information, and then maybe eventually charge for the power, even though you don't have to do that from the get-go.
Yep, we do have a couple dumb chargers at City Hall, but the rest of ours are smart chargers.
Great. How many chargers do you guys have altogether?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. 8.
That the city installs, owns, operates. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
That's
plus one private for our fleet use at our service center.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. What are the locations? City Hall, Community Center.
City Hall, the Rec Center, and at our brand new Westwood Hills Nature Center Interpretive Center. There are 4 level 2 chargers, which I am frantically working on getting activated right now. And I'm gonna put in a plug, no pun intended, for the Nature Center. Please go check it out. We had the ribbon cutting last weekend. It's amazing.
Awesome, thank you so much. Cool. So thank you, Emily, appreciate it. Now we're gonna turn it over. We have another city that's gonna share with us. Lauren from Rochester will talk a bit about their charger.
Thank you. So I am just going to give a disclaimer that I am newer to this, since I'm newer to my role, and so most of the notes I'm sharing today came from Kevin Bright, who was here for kind of the installation and facilitation of these chargers, but I'm happy to follow up if there's any questions that I can't answer for some reason. So our chargers were, the initial chargers that we had were funded through Rochester Public Utilities, and then now our remaining chargers are being funded through the city's capital infrastructure process and then paid by our parking department within Public Works. So we have a goal to install chargers in all of our city parking facilities. And so these pictures here show an example of couple of the ones that have been installed, so we have at least one in each parking ramp downtown. With more funding, I mean, we would likely install more stations, especially since we're trying to grow EV use in our community. And really once visitors start coming back in masses to the clinic in downtown area. With less funding, we'd probably just stage our installations out over a longer period of time. But moving forward, we've talked to a few different EV vendors, and just the range of vendors has helped reduce prices overall, and some even have funds to install them in our downtown area in 2021. But that will depend on our city council approval of our DMC budget. So we're installing a few yet this year in some of our remaining city parking garages. That's really all I have.
Great. Questions that folks might have. So both of the examples, the funding was, really through the city, through capital. It's CIP, capital improvement. I always want to say improvement. I don't think that's the right word. Infrastructure.
Capital infrastructure process, yeah. And Kevin said both of these were around 10K for the charger and installation, like all in.
And did you say what year they were?
I don't know exactly what year these were installed. I think they're all pretty recent, because I know we're finishing up yet this year with the remaining, so that we have one in each city parking garage. So within the last year or two.
Okay, great. Awesome.
I have a question. Sure. Has your city factored in possible longer term maintenance costs as they view the pros and cons of funding these things? Is there anybody that has kind of a ballpark on, 1 year, 2 year, 4 year, whatever?
I don't know if that's been discussed or factored in, but I can reach out to our public works department and follow up on that.
And that's something we're going to be looking at in St. Louis Park when we compare level 2 and DC fast charging options to figure out what's the total life cycle cost for each, because I think that's an important question.
Yeah, definitely an important question. I mean, and that's one of the things we talk about when we talk about when we get to the part, the sessions where we talk about fleets. We're trying to encourage people to think about the life of the vehicle, because it's cheaper over time when you compare it to an internal combustion engine for the life of the vehicle. So yeah, that's really good information about what are the it's not just the installation costs. What are the costs along, and for budget planning for those costs monthly or yearly, however they appear.
Just some sort of half-page fact sheet sort of thing that lays that out would be super helpful, because this is a barrier, a stumbling block that we run into with once you got it in the ground, then what?
So,
well, yeah, and go ahead, Caitlin.
I just wanted to add that, last week we had our good friend Anders Tulin on here from Siemens to talk, and he talked about a little bit of the maintenance required for charging stations, and he kind of indicated that from a maintenance perspective, there really isn't much that is required. So the maintenance that will obviously come into play are, if there are technology breakdowns, you'll want to have a plan for that. Additionally, if you don't have a cord management system installed, you might get additional vandalism or impacts to your cord. And so installing a cord management system while you're putting in the charging station will keep your maintenance costs down. But for the most part, your operating costs are going to be the main consideration there.
How do we get that documented, though? Because if we're actually going to hand something to our city council, some sort of
so
rather than just word of mouth. I mean, I like what you're saying, but it's kind of anecdotal.
Right, and the tricky part is even if you're just focused on operating costs, that's going to vary between every charging station depending on the features that you have installed. So it's really a developer question. So if you're getting bids from, let's say, ChargePoint, Zeph Energy, Greenlots, you want to be asking them upfront, what are my operating costs going to be? What are my networking fees going to be? And they should be able to give you a number for that. And if they don't, that's kind of a red flag.
All right, super, thanks.
Thanks, Caitlin. Very, very helpful. Other questions? Here's a question from Bill. I see electric-only spaces. Is there legal precedence to limit the space for this use? Do any cities fine tow vehicles that are not electric? I don't know that there's a legal precedent, but there's definitely a precedent for having, electric only electric vehicles. And I think most cities' chargers don't have enforcement. That has become a bigger and bigger question. I know that, I think it was last year, right, Caitlin, that the city of St. Paul did put into, I don't know, what they put it into, but they made it a finable offense. And so I know for, in the city of St. Paul that they are taking that on, but Caitlin might have some more thoughts about that.
Yeah, I don't recall the details on that. It's probably a city by city decision. And you might have legal authority to do that within city ordinances. I'm not entirely sure. But that's more of my colleague Brian Ross's expertise area. At one point, the Minnesota legislature, there was, I think, Representative Pat Garofalo had at one point introduced legislation that would make it a finable offense for an internal combustion engine to park in an electric vehicle charging space. It didn't go anywhere. It's not law, but we do hear a lot of the times of, it's called icing when an internal combustion engine parks in those spaces. And, it's not a legal thing right now, but obviously you're putting in charging stations because you want them to be used by users. And an internal combustion engine is not going to be using them. So it's kind of in your best interest to make sure that where you're installing charging stations, it's very clear that it's for electric vehicles only when charging. And so you're not going to have someone that isn't going to be using that station just parked out in front of it all day so that it can't be used by vehicles that really need that fueling. It'd be akin to, let's say, a Nissan Leaf driver pulling up to a gas station and pulling in that space and just sitting there. That's not helping anyone. So. And I think that, beyond kind of city fines and towing vehicles, there are other ways to modify behavior. And one is that, I think the city of Edina and some other places, I believe, have a system where there's a 2-hour limit even for the charging vehicles. Oh, I guess that would only apply to the EVs that stay there longer, not for an ICE vehicle. Yeah, good question. So, we can, if we have any more information about that, we can take a look at the St. Paul mechanism that they were using, but I believe they started making it finable. And so it's up to the city. You can have an ordinance or a rule that goes into effect that says, these are only for electric vehicles. And I think that's where siting matters. I think mostly in a parking area, people don't care so much if the EV charging stations are in the back. What becomes kind of a challenge is if they're up front, which we like for norming kind of that, this is the trend going forward. But people get really resentful if there's a couple of really close parking spots that are only for electric vehicles and they don't see very many cars parked there very often. So
it's a local decision. You have to decide what, you know, what works for you all. And I don't know if any other cities have examples or want to jump in here, but.
Diana, I can jump in really, just really quick.
Yeah.
We did have a number of vehicles parked in our non-EVs parked in our EV spots at the rec center last winter. It seemed to happen mostly during hockey practice and when the lot's really, really busy. I mean, we did intentionally site the chargers so that they're not in like the Rockstar parking space. They're a little bit further away, but people still found them very tempting. So we just got on, you know, social media. There's a social media site specifically for the rec center, and we tried to keep driving the message home that that's not cool, and compliance increased, and we'll just keep monitoring it. We don't really have a way to find anybody or ticket anybody, or, you know, we're not going to tow. So it's just a question of maybe leaving some kind notes on windshields, or maybe not so kind notes. It depends on my mood, but you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, having, you know, printing up a little, you know, note or something and having them in the rec center so that you could just put it on the windshield saying, hey, you know, just want to remind you this is not a space for a car that's not electric, you know. I think nicer is better to start with. Considering the vitriol in our country, you know, I think kinder is better than not right now, it feels like.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. So we'll move a little bit into kind of funding opportunities, you know, especially for, you know, folks that haven't, you know, haven't already put in charging stations. What are some of the funding opportunities that you're excited about? You know, are there other funding opportunities that have come to mind as we've been talking or have been discussed? Are you, I mean, I guess the big question is a lack of funding really still a barrier for you? You know, that is the big question. You know, a number of cities, again, depending on where you're putting it, you can be all in, you know, for the most part for between $6,000 and $12,000, again, depending on where you're installing it and what kind of charger you get, which isn't probably for most cities a bank breaker, but, you know, just curious kind of if your city is really interested in putting in electric vehicle charging, you know, what are still, you know, is the lack of funding still a barrier? Or any of the other questions that I posed. We're just trying to get you guys to talk a little bit more. And if there aren't any, oh, great. Brandy, why don't you just chime in right now and talk about, you know, some of the numbers and stuff from your projects, because you've done a number of projects up at Beach Lake.
Yeah. Thanks, Diana. Sorry. First, I mean, the VW one was really great. As I'll give you the numbers on this. It was $32,000 for the whole project, but that included some in-kind in there too that was over on the top, because there's always things that come about. So of the $3,200, $15,000 around was a grant from MPCA through the VW money, and the application, though you had to understand a little bit about what the chargers were, I had the assistance of Zeph Energy, and we filled that out no problem. And so that was really good. But we also were very creative and had a $16,500 match. And that was where we engaged the power companies in the 3 locales to put in a match, somehow convincing them that it was in their best interest too. And also a lot of match because we installed the chargers. These aren't rocket science. You can have your maintenance guys, your landscape guys, whatever, install them with some guidance. And we had an electrician on staff, so that worked out really well. So that was project number 1. We had 3 chargers for that $32,000 project. The second one was because we were shovel ready and we jumped on an opportunity as it was presented to us. Another power company had a project fail in another area, and we said, hey, we're ready. We got the line pulled right through here. So we got another L2 free of charge. We just had to do the installation and maintenance on it. So that was fantastic. So it was phase 2. And then phase 3 was, we were very fortunate at one of our areas, our casino, at Northern Lights in Walker, Minnesota, to be as part of the fast charging corridor. So we got L3 and an L2 out of that one. They are currently being installed, and they really didn't cost us anything because that was part of that big corridor project with MPCA. But what's interesting about that is Zeph has decided on ours that we're not charging for any of our L2s, including the one with that corridor, because honestly, Zeph made the right call. If they charge for their L2, who's going to really use it? Because there's already 3 L3s over there, or L2, excuse me, that are free. So, so that's what, on our really short and skinny, that's how we funded our 3. And we have plans to fund future ones too. We have 2 more phases in our minds to fund, and they may be funded somewhat internally, but I can't really speak on that too much.
That's really helpful. And I wonder if perhaps, and maybe, I don't know if Chris or Caitlin is, I think Caitlin's in charge of the screen right now, that you might turn back to the checklist for the PCA grant, because Drew had a question about, you know, what level of specifics are needed to submit the MPCA grant. So, like, do you need a site plan and a plan showing that you can connect, or do you need to have a purchase agreement and a contract already prepared with the EV charging company? Like, what is needed? And I don't know if, Brandy, you remember from your installation, excuse me, or Chris can speak to this based on the checklist, because it says, you know, this is a checklist of what you need. See, warranty, payment, service.
That's been a while ago that we applied for this. So I know I relied heavily with the contractor, because we decided we didn't want to go with ChargePoint or any of the others right away because of a multitude of different things. And Zeph was also, we had smart chargers with them and no fees, right? So we took into account the questions from before, the after fees. You know, this way we get our information, it doesn't cost us anything, and we're not charging for them, so that may make a difference for us. So that may not be the same for you in your situation. But I remember looking at this right away and thinking, oh God, I don't have time for this. And then you just kind of start working at it, and you get it, and you work with someone who is, say, Great Plains or your contractor of choice, and you really start putting it together. Because you do need, I would dare say, you do need the contractor, because there's some specifics like warranty and everything like that. So you kind of have to know what you're doing. This isn't like get the money and then figure it out. No, this is figure it out and then apply for the money. So I think that's the most key.
And it does say on here, you know, that, so A is a map of the station location with the following details. So they want these details. Mm-hmm. And so here it is, you know, the local electric permits. Local electric permits must be secured and regulations followed for the level 2 charging stations, conduit and electric service box. My question, I guess, maybe Chris, is that, okay, so here's the checklist. They didn't need, did they have to have, they didn't have to have this in order to apply, right? But this was the checklist, right?
Yeah, so this is the checklist after they've been approved. So there's a level of specificity here that wasn't in the initial application. And the next round, I know they are tweaking the application in the next round. So it might not be exactly the same, but at least in the first round, what they required was kind of the information of the applicant. So let's say the city of, I don't know, St. Louis Park, and then the location of where the charger is going to be, the host site, not exactly where in the parking lot it's going to be, but the host site. So like the rec center, for example. And then they ask a bunch of questions about is the host site in an environmental justice area, and that's based on the MPCA environmental justice map. The planned percentage of renewable energy usage, installation of single station or dual head, whether or not it will be networked, and whether it will be used for the general public charging. So all of those answers, I think they prefer public charging. They prefer 100% renewable energy. And then, so they ask you later on to expound on those questions a little bit. So how are you going to meet the basic equipment requirements? And so you could say working with a contractor or whatever and just ensure these contract. And then they ask about renewable energy networking, and then a detailed budget on the project costs.
So Drew, I hope to answer your question. So you don't have to have a purchase agreement and a contract already with the EV. You have to have estimates, and I think they can even be verbal estimates, right, Chris?
Yeah.
For the project. So it's not, because why would you have a contract prepared with an EV charging company if you don't even know if you're going to get the funding? So it's simpler, perhaps, than maybe you're anticipating. Just what Chris described, showing kind of the general site plan and some of the other pieces. But you do have to have, I think, one or two verbal bids, but they could be verbal, et cetera. So it's a little, it's not quite the heavy lift that maybe you're expecting. Great. Perfect. Answered his questions. And thanks again, Brandy, for jumping in and sharing your information. And so I think we just got a little bit of time left. Since this is our last meeting for Charging Up, just wanted to kind of do a little reminder on the topics that we covered and the resources provided. And then we'll have a little discussion about kind of, curious what is everybody's kind of next steps, and just a couple of little reminders and where we're going after this. So just to remind you, our first meeting on September 3rd, we talked about roles and partnerships. We did that overview of charging stations that Caitlin did, and all of the notes and recordings and slides are on the Google Drive that Chris has sent out and follow-up materials. The second one, we talked about siting considerations. So a lot of the things that we touched on today as well, really locating those good locations, best practices, et cetera. The last meeting we had, we really did a deep dive into vendors and service, including where to purchase them, maintenance, all of those things. So if you're looking to review or you want to share with somebody else on your staff, you can look back at those. Don't feel like I need to do the recap for today because you were all here, but really we focused on funding today. So, here's some of the resources. Again, we had resources that we sent out in the emails. We have this charging guidance on Drive Electric Minnesota, which is getting a refresh really soon. Shift Electric, that's Jukka Kukkonen and his organization. He has an incredible website with lots of information as well, including multi-unit development charging, so multi-family charging. In meeting 3, we had this. We talked about the white paper and the DC fast charger calculator, so we have some other tools and resources there. And then that MPCA map, that's really important if you're going to be applying for the level 2 funding. That shows the critical areas that they're looking at specifically. So curious, what next steps are you going to take? I mean, I think we heard from Marine. They're talking to Excel. They're going to try to figure out, if their road is a county road or a city road. So they're moving along, and that's what we were really trying to do with this cohort, is to get you prepared to take action, to get you across the finish line. So that is really what we're trying to do. And so, I don't know, Minnetonka, Inver Grove, Oakdale, other places, what are the steps you're going to be taking to kind of, continue down your path?
This is Allie from Inver Grove. So we are currently in the Partners in Energy process right now. It's mostly focused on, community-wide action. So it's not just focused on municipal facilities or municipal actions, but I do hope to incorporate, well, electrification is coming out as a stakeholder topic that they'd like to focus on, just in general, efficient transportation. So I'm hoping this gives us another push to, focus on that in municipal facilities, given that it is a full community-wide plan. And then the other thing that we struggle with a lot is just trying to stick with our replacement schedules in those constraints is actually been quite a challenge because when we only have, heavy-duty vehicles up for replacement, it just really doesn't make sense. And then also with COVID going on right now, it does, change how our vehicles are being used. When people are working from home, they're finding other ways of using vehicles or actually maybe even using their own personal vehicles instead of city vehicles. So that kind of changes things a little bit for us. But yep, those are some of the issues we're grappling with right now. But I really do hope that, either next year or the year after, we'll start adding some of these electric vehicles to our fleet. And, initiatives like CCA, that it really helps push us forward and keep the momentum. So thank you for doing this again. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for that. And the other thing I didn't mention is also on the Google Doc, we have resources, including articles. There's been like 4 or 5 articles in the last several weeks about, how electric vehicles are doing better in the pandemic of purchasing vehicles than internal combustion vehicles, more stuff about the vehicles coming out, including the Ford F-150, in the next couple of years, which is going to be a game changer, because I think it's like the 35% of all vehicles purchased in the U.S. are F-150s. So that's a big deal. I know, same face, Emily. I have the same face. Why? Truck culture, right? So no, that's great. Thank you, Allie. I know that you were part of City Charging Ahead, and there are challenges, and 2020 is just challenging all of us in so many very many ways. But I appreciate your perseverance, and whatever we can do to help you. And being part of the Excel Partners in Energy is a great way to kind of get there, and they've got some great programs. So you're very lucky to be in a city that has that as well. Others. I'm curious what Oakdale, I know Shannon, you're brand new, it's like day 2, so maybe, there's not a lot to share, but I'm curious, kind of what the thinking is from there. Or I see John Paulson on the call too. Hi, John. Are you guys doing more? Because you have, you did your project in partnership with Hutchison Utilities. Do you have more projects in the works?
Yeah, we're still tracking things too, in the sense of trying to grow that a little bit more. Like everyone else, it seems 1, 2, 3 ain't enough. I think that network's going to have to continue to grow. So yeah, we're still tracking opportunities. We have a local downtown business that had a couple chargers outside of town, and they decided to move their business in town. So they moved those onto actually a city parking lot. So we're seeing more and more of that too from the private side as well. So it's great.
Cool. Awesome. Good to hear. If there's no others, I see it's 11:28 and people have jumped off, and I have some exciting update to share. For folks that don't remember, starting Saturday, it's National Drive Electric Week, and Drive Electric Minnesota is a partnership facilitated by Great Plains Institute, and Caitlin and I work to co-convene a communication team, and we are trying to do a big splash in Minnesota for I Drive Electric Week. Since we can't do ride and drives, which have been our gravy the past several years, we're going social media with our campaign, encouraging people to post selfies themselves with their vehicles and use the hashtag #IDriveElectric or #IRideElectric if you ride on an electric bus or perhaps an electric Uber, whatever that might be. There's a link here, and we'll send that out in the follow-up that has information. We have instructions on how people can use this really cool frame on Facebook. And so, you know, really, if you're able to especially share on social media as part of Drive Electric Week and get people who are in your community who drive electric to participate, we're really trying to get this across the state, encourage people to share that. And it's, again, part of that process of normalizing driving electric. So, you know, keep a lookout for CCA 2.0 Google Drive with recordings, notes, etc. We are starting to, you know, we'll begin planning kind of our next phase for Cities Charging Ahead Part 2.0. Likely will be, the plan is that we'll focus on fleets. Perhaps it'll be something in November. We're just really trying to sort that out right now because we have another cohort with municipal utilities that we're kind of going back and forth with. So be on the lookout for that information, but you know, we'll let you know when we do our fleet, our next session about fleets. But please promote this iDriveElectric campaign if you're able to, and the link will make it really easy. You can just link to the Drive Electric Minnesota post. I think that's it. It's 11:31. Thank you all for being here and for being part of this. Really appreciate it. As always, you know, you can follow up with questions to us offline. And yeah, thanks for being here. Have a great weekend, and happy National Drive Electric Week starting in 2 days. Thanks, everyone.